Good day, everyone. I'm Diane Hodiak, Executive Director of 350 Deschutes. And I'd like to welcome you to the 5th Annual Go Clean Energy Conference. Hopefully some of you have been with us in several panels that we've had ongoing. This is our last day, but I want to thank you for joining us. And I just have a couple announcements before we begin the Cpace session. And that is, I would like to thank our generous volunteers, speakers, moderators, and of course, our sponsors that include Pure Light Power, Ledge Capital, Pacific Power, Deschutes County Solid Waste, Energy Trust of Oregon, G5, Neil Kelly, National Car Charging, MindClick, First Interstate Bank, and Republic Services. A special thank you to Amy Perez, our web designer, and Set in Motion Marketing. Please honor them with your business whenever possible and learn more about them at the expo page at our gocleanenergy.org website. I'd like to also remind people that immediately following this webinar, we will have the breakout sessions, and those should be fascinating because that will be a lot of how-to information with our experts and talking about how projects can be pulled together. But what will happen is that following the Cpace presentation, you will need to register on another link for those breakout sessions. And that link should be coming up in the chat now, or if not now, shortly thereafter, so you know where to register at the conclusion of the Cpace presentation. And so without further ado, I would like to turn this over to our moderator, Michael Bahr of Michael Bahr Consulting.
And thank you so much. So we're going to be talking about Cpace. We're going to have a great set of panelists today. We're going to kind of do a Cpace 101, about 5 or 10 minutes of that, and then we're going to break into real specific projects, and then of course into the breakout room to have further discussions, and there will be time for Q&A at the end of the presentations today. So just the high-level introduction, our panelists today will be Rachel Davis, Senior Vice President with Petros Pace Finance, Phillipe Hartley, Managing Director of Clean Financing LLC, Rafi Golberstein, President and CEO of Pace Loan Group, and Robert Countryman, Market President with First Interstate Bank. Again, my name is Michael Bahr. I've been a project developer for more than 25 years. Been involved with Cpace since 2008, one of the gray hairs in this. I've been a project developer and financier for 5 Cpace programs, including the Los Angeles County Commercial PACE Program, the Green Finance San Francisco Commercial PACE Program, Y Green Energy Fund, Poppy Bank, and Renewal. And then I've consulted with 5 other Cpace programs as they set up their program. So I'm going to kind of do about 5 minutes of kind of PACE 101. I'm going to kind of load up my presentation right here and see if this works. Okay. And let's go over to hopefully folks can see that. I actually don't know if folks can see that. Let's.
Yeah, we can see your presentation.
Thank you very much, Phillipe. So, commercial property assessed clean energy. As the name states, property assessed clean energy. The program started as a clean energy finance program. It has since greatly expanded. It's eligible, PACE is available in 37 states, including Oregon, but now it includes renewable energy generation and storage, energy efficiency, water conservation, resiliency, and that resiliency kind of depends on region. So California, we got seismic retrofits. In Florida, along the mid-Atlantic, storm protection, flood protection along Gulf of Mexico, fire prevention in California. there's within those categories, over 100 eligible items. And that, it really is, it includes HVAC and lighting and doors and windows and installation, but anything now that has an energy rating is under the energy efficiency side. Includes heat pumps, so a lot of different items available. Types of property, almost every single type of property is eligible to use Cpace financing on. Hospitality, office, industrial, retail, and including government-owned and private business leased properties. So, and then we'll be in this panel drilling down into specific case studies around these types of properties. So kind of why Cpace? Well, it started as an alternative to credit-based financing, and that's really kind of what the product has remained. So it's based on available property equity, not the financials of the business, right? And the financing is secured by contractual tax assessment on the property, not by the books of the company, okay, or by the property owner, right? So property owner does not have to make a financial guarantee. It's all based on the value of the property. The way it works is tax district is formed, property owner opts into the Cpace tax district, and then Cpace financing is repaid as part of the property tax bill. Does not increase the property tax. It's just a line item on the property tax bill, just like when you look at your property tax bill and you see school districts, sewer district, same thing would happen. You'd see a Cpace district. And the local government are the folks who form that tax district, and I'm going to have a separate slide kind of about that. I know I'm going fast, but again, this is just really kind of high level, and in Q of A we can drill down, and in the breakout sessions also. So benefits of Cpace: 100% project financing, typically no capital outlay from the property owner, right? Fixed payment terms up to 30 years. That allows for the energy savings or the energy generation created by a project to pay the financing of the project. In addition, there's multiple flavors of Cpace, including power purchase agreements that are available. Typically very easy financial and eligibility qualifications. I'll have a separate slide a little bit about that. Again, as I mentioned, no personal guarantee needed by the property owner. There's no credit score requirement. Typically, it's off balance sheet treatment by the business. It's treated as an expense rather than a security debt on the property. Really key non-recourse. PACE cannot be accelerated for missed payments. Only thing that's ever due in PACE is your current payment and if there's missed payments. So can't be accelerated. And then there's multiple security for the mortgage holders within Cpace. And we'll talk a little bit about that again. So Cpace eligibility criteria: the project cannot exceed 15% available property equity, though in some cases it can be up to 25%, especially in new construction. And in some retrofits, and some of the PACE companies are allowing 20% of available. But typically 15 is a good math formula to work with. And your PACE financing plus your mortgage typically cannot exceed 97% of the property equity. So two key formulas there. Also to be eligible, no late property tax payments within the last 3 to 5 years, depending on the program. Some it's the last 6 payments, some it's the last 10 payments. Again, since it's collected on the property tax bill, they want to see that folks have been current on their property tax. Got to be current on your mortgage, no notice of defaults, and not currently in bankruptcy or no involuntary liens on the property. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy to qualify. One big thing to really be aware of in Cpace: most Cpace lenders require that the mortgage lender says yes to Cpace, right? So that lender will be notified that a property owner would like Cpace financing. Typically, the Cpace financier will work with the mortgage lender to secure that lender consent. And that's typically an education process for the lender, because they need to understand what PACE really is compared to what they think PACE is. A lot of folks still think PACE was what it was in 2008, 2009, 2010. It has greatly evolved, and there's, again, security measures for that lender involved. And then, so lots of finance institutions have consented to Cpace. We have one on our panelists today. And typically, if the lender consent cannot be secured, that property owner who still wants to go for Cpace can refinance their mortgage with a lending institution that does consent to Cpace. Last slide in the 101 is talk about local government and Cpace programs. So when Cpace first started, it was government programs because we had basically the credit markets were locked up. We're talking 2008, 2009. So the idea was that public capital could flow into the marketplaces. That has evolved. So now that most Cpace programs are privately financed and they're privately operated, right? Less than a handful of government programs across the 37 states at this point in time. So the role of the local government now is to adopt a Cpace program in their city or county after the state has adopted theirs. They define, that local government defines who's eligible to provide financing and who's going to be the program administrator. Typically, most of the financiers are also program administrators, and you can have multiple program administrators in one region. California has, I think, about 11 at this point in time, and lots of regions have 5 or 6 program administrators who are also the financiers. The local government records the Cpace tax assessment on the property. When the property owner opts in, that recording is done exactly like a school district recording is done. Sewer district is done, a utility district, same process. They collect the property tax that's paid by the property owner, and then they distribute that payment out to the Cpace lender, exactly as they would any other tax district financing that they accept. So really, there's no new functions that a government has to add to what it's already doing in order for a Cpace program to exist. So that is that. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to go, give me a second here to click.
I just wanted to mention, I know that you're busy presenting, Michael, but if our participants could enter who they are into the chat and give our presenters a little more information about you. I know some of you have multiple hats, whether you're a policymaker or you represent an agricultural entity or whatever your interest is, what brings you to this webinar. That would be really helpful to our presenters. Sorry for the interruption, Michael.
No, that was great. Thank you so very much. So I will be watching the chat and the Q&A so that we can have questions and get those to our panelists at the end of their presentations. So our first panelist who will be presenting is Rachel Davis, Senior Vice President, Petros PACE Finance. I will mute and let Rachel come in.
All right. Hey, everybody. Hope you're having a great afternoon and that you can see my screen here. I am with Petros PACE Finance. We are a national PACE lender dedicated to commercial PACE on a national basis. And give me just a second here. Let me see if I can make this full screen for you. Okay, that is much better. Okay, so Petros is based out of Austin, and we're a national PACE lender. We work on PACE projects from, call it 1 million all the way up to 200 million plus. We have transacted in 14 states plus Washington, D.C. to date, and look forward to doing projects in a lot of other markets here in the very near term as well. And so I am based out of Houston, and I lead our national business development team and marketing efforts for the firm. And prior to my time here at Petros, which has been about 5 years now, I spent about 15 years in the energy sector working for a large energy company originating commercial electricity contracts, and then working with a national business development team doing on-site and off-site renewables contracts with Fortune 500 companies. So decided to get into the financing side of it here. All right. So I wanted to go through a couple of case studies here, just to give you guys an example of what Cpace can do for various project types and different opportunities to bring it into the capital stack and the value that it may play for each one of those. And so this is a new construction project that we funded in Omaha, Nebraska several years ago. They were undergoing a large master plan redevelopment of downtown Omaha, and so wanted to transform an underutilized parking lot and former soup plant into an area where the community could live, work, and play in a mixed-use facility. And so our just about $25 million worth of Cpace went to fund the efficiency components of a 333-room Marriott hotel, 223-unit apartment building, as well as the 90,000 square feet retail within the same center. And so it was a complex transaction, had a lot of different parties that were involved, multiple senior lenders, as well as TIF financing, EB5, equity. So it was a really great project. And I think this one closed in about 6 weeks from term sheet signing until actual funding of the project. So PACE is something that can come into a project fairly quickly and can close quickly as well. So you'll hear this a lot of the measures that were funded by Cpace, it tends to look fairly similar from one project to the next. Essentially, it's anything that can reduce your energy consumption or that is built above code, depending on what the local baseline is. And so that tends to fall into your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, renewable space. And so here we actually funded roofing, windows, doors, HVAC, lighting, building controls, and even elevators in this one were determined to be energy efficient. And so the program does require in Nebraska that the savings generated by the project exceed the investment. And by investment in Nebraska, that means the principal amount that is being borrowed. And so that has to exceed 1. So the project has to bring more benefit than it does in terms of cost. And so here the sponsor was looking at over $28 million in savings for the project over the lifetime, as well as over 14 million pounds of carbon that was reduced on an annual basis for the project. So, and this one ended up qualifying for about 22 years of amortization. So just to give you guys an idea of what the life of these loans can look like. All right, here is another one that's a retrofit. And so this is actually a project in downtown Syracuse. Again, they were trying to revitalize the downtown district. And so this was a big portion of it. And so we actually came into this project to refinance the retrofit that had been previously completed a couple of years beforehand. And so our funding in terms of Cpace came in to allow the borrower to pull out some of the equity they had used for the efficiency measures previously and put that into an extension of the project that brought in an additional 50 keys to the hotel. So a great use of the funding that allowed them to continue building into this historic, efficient building. And so they took about $10 million worth of PACE to go into the 261 key hotel. Again, similar measures, right? Building envelope, windows, doors, HVAC, plumbing, lighting, and electrical systems. And on this one, this was again a very complex capital stack that PACE came into. So had a senior lender that was obviously willing to consent and was actually really great to work with in getting PACE consent on this project, as well as historic tax credits and several layers of different types of grants that went into this project. So this one ended up having about a 23-year useful life, which then equated into the term that we were able to give them for the assessment. And then the electricity, gas, water, as well as operational savings over the term of the project were in excess of 7 million. In addition to that, they also had greenhouse gas savings that were over 3.5 million pounds per year. So again, you know, a great financial return for the sponsor, facilitated additional efficiency measures for the project, and really brought a lot of savings to the project and helped revitalize downtown Syracuse as well. And here's my contact information. So happy to address any questions now or after the webinar. So I will turn it over to you, I believe, Phillipe.
Yeah, next up, Phillipe Hartley, Managing Director, Clean Financing LLC. Thank you, Rachel. No questions for you at this particular moment. We have a couple questions coming in that we'll take up after the speakers. But again, if anybody has any directly as a speaker is speaking, just go ahead and put it in the chat or the Q&A and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Diane. I am now endeavoring to share my screen. And if you'll just give me 1 second to get that done, that'd be awesome. And here we go. This is the one. All right. So, Mike, am I sharing my screen right now?
I don't see it.
All right. What we have here is a failure to master the technology. So let's go back and try this. And how about now? Am I
We see your screen.
Yep. All right. Well, that's beautiful. So I just need to go back a little bit. And here we are. Hello, everyone. And thank you for this opportunity. We're excited to be speaking to Oregon, gorgeous state. I want to address one question that was placed in the chat box a second ago. Take a few seconds of my time for this presentation to answer the question in the sidebar about an expose apparently that was done on PACE financing on national television. I want to make sure that the audience here understands the difference between commercial PACE financing and residential PACE financing. There are differently legislated or differently managed programs. They're entirely, they have different procedural methods. And there are many states in the nation that run commercial PACE program, but not residential PACE program. So why is that a problem? Because residential PACE had a couple of hiccups in its development. There were some kind of rapacious contractors, if you would, that provided an opportunity for negative headlines, and as a result of it, you know, a few people jumped on the bandwagon. This is an old story that, you know, recently a late night show decided to kind of dig up again and write a story about and get some airtime filled with, but it does not at all impact commercial PACE, which has a stellar record and has not been touched at all with any of that negative publicity. I hope that addresses that. My name is Phillipe Hartley. I run Clean Financing. We're a shop that is a specialty that is specialized in project financing, and that means that we really have a particular point of view that I'm going to discuss in 1 second. We also run a platform called pacefy.com, which I'll talk about at my last slide. It's important you understand when we go into this what the focus of the speaker is. Rachel's excellent presentation about the beautiful projects that they do really talks about a company that specializes in per Rachel's point, $1 million and over, and typically even much larger than that. We actually are on the other end of that spectrum. We look at $5 million and under, and our average project is $450,000. We have a different approach. We do what's called the long tail of commercial PACE. That is all the medium and small organizations across America that need to upgrade their infrastructure. So we focus on retrofit financing mostly, not new construction. We work to fund the project. That is to say, we find the right funding solution for the project although we do have our own capital, our objective is to fund the project. So often we'll work with other organizations, such as those represented by my esteemed colleagues on this call today, to actually find the right funding for that project if ours is not the right one. We do source tax equity. It's an important aspect of the project we do, because a very large number of the projects we do in retrofit involves solar energy, solar and storage, that kind of thing. And tax equity plays a big role on that. And PACE is actually nimble enough to be able to accommodate that, a kind of structure where you bring in third-party tax equity. And that's one of the two case studies we're going to look at in a second. So we work with all asset classes and project scopes. So we will do reflective paints and roofs and air conditioning, HVAC, all that kind of stuff. It just so happens that about 70% of our projects are solar. Our primary source of generation of projects, if you would, is from contractors and property managers, and we focus our marketing to that segment of the industry. Typically, a transaction, a PACE transaction is a fairly straightforward process, in the sense that you have a lender that's interested in long-term lending. You have a profitable, hopefully, corporation that has an annual tax obligation, and that's looking for normalized energy costs. And when I say normalized here, I mean predictable, as in they know exactly, or they would like to know exactly, what their energy costs will be 10 years from now, as opposed to the great unknown, which is presented to them currently through utility sourced energy. Those companies are looking for immediate savings on their investment, and they want to cash flow those savings through PACE lending. They are looking to reap the tax benefits if there are any to be had, and they're sizable, of course, in solar and solar plus storage. And they want no out-of-pocket costs. They want to basically go in with a positive cash flow position immediately. So the first example we're going to look at today is in the healthcare industry. This is a center out of Southern California that serves adults with developmental disabilities, and it's got a multiple building campus. Their objective was essentially to redo the roof. As you can see, the roof on the building on the right side has a little age on it. They wanted to redo that, but mostly they wanted to normalize their energy costs, and they wanted to put solar on. So their project looks like this. They're a nonprofit. They have tremendous property value in Southern California. They are in a class of real estate that has typically lumpy income. Now, what I mean by that, and I'm not speaking specifically about this client who happens to have a large endowment, but nonprofits have the credit challenge, if you would, of having some good years and some bad years. It's true for hospitals, it's true for nonprofit service industries, et cetera. It just depends on the generosity of the givers at any given time. And then nonprofit projects are typically in the sub-$1 million, not, I don't need to say always, but I would say if you were to average them out, they are well in the sub-$1 million range. This particular property needed a $750,000 property upgrade, including all the scopes we talked about. But here was the problem. The model we looked at before does not apply here, because we do not have a profitable corp with tax obligations. We have a nonprofit that doesn't have tax obligations. So we have to now create a PACE lending structure that allows this organization to get some of the tax benefits associated with solar and the roofing that comes when when you're putting solar on the roof. You get part of the tax benefits on that as well. So we have to bring in a third party. That third party is a party that's only interested in the tax benefits of this solar installation. That party is one that has absolutely no interest in credit risk. They're only interested in the solar operation risk that yields the tax benefits. And so what we have here is an interesting development where all of the parties involved in this transaction actually fill each other's needs. And this is the beauty of PACE lending when it comes to that kind of a structure, is that it is flexible enough in most programs. And there are some programs that do not allow these structures, but they are few and far between. The vast majority of them across the nation allows this structure, where basically the PACE lender meets its obligation of having a long assessment and no operational responsibility. The nonprofit has all of its objectives met, which is that even though it doesn't have a tax, an opportunity to take advantage of the tax benefits, it receives some of them via a discount from the tax partner on the face value of the cost of the project. So the tax partner gives contributes, if you would, a certain portion of the project cost, and in exchange gets all of the tax benefits and shares some of those tax benefits via a discount with the nonprofit. The nonprofit, on the other hand, is not creditworthy to the tax provider, so the nonprofit turns to the PACE entity to borrow the money to prepay 20 years worth of yield, what we call a yield, which is basically solar production, and 20 or 25 years, can even be as long as 30 years, and prepays all of that to the power purchase agreement or lease provider. And there you have a completed transaction. So the first thing that happens is, per the little numerical references here, is that the tax partner invests in the structure on the nonprofit. The PACE lender then, with the approval of the nonprofit, pays the deposit or the value of the future yield of the solar system to the tax partner. That amount represents approximately 80 to 90%, somewhere in between, of the face value of the contract. And then the nonprofit makes its annual payments to the PACE lender. So in the end, this was a very successful undertaking. St. Madeleine's got all of its solar, and the project was quite successful for an organization this size, as you can see. We have another kind of case study I wanted to take you through here. This is a church in Stockton, California. Again, a nonprofit, high property value because of its location, has a fairly nice size campus. It needed $375,000, but it had an interesting situation. It had previously taken on a PACE assessment to redo all of their HVAC in that rather sizable building, as you can see. So the structure there was slightly different, because here we had really essentially two PACE lenders. We had an existing PACE lender, and we had an interested PACE lender. And so, save for that first PACE lender at the bottom, you recognize the pattern of the three partners to do the solar project. But we have to deal, or the question is, what were we going to do about that first PACE lender? Well, the first PACE lender actually does not matter so long as there remains enough exploitable equity in the underlying property for the church to add an additional assessment. In this particular case, the first PACE lender was actually taken out, and the two assessments were consolidated into one. And then a couple of years later, the church actually did a refinance on their property and took out the second lender, and now essentially are in this position where they have a third party that is looking after the solar installation, and they're making their payments basically through their mortgage. So the PACE structure there was extremely helpful to that nonprofit to be able to get over these various financing hurdles, to get financing at terms that they could afford with no money down, and to end up with a completely new HVAC system, a completely new solar system, some roof work, et cetera, and still be cash flow positive per their report. So this again was a successful project, cutting their electric costs by over 50%. I want to end this presentation by talking about what we've created to help contractors be able to accelerate the speed of their proposals, leveraging Pace. We've created an online platform called pacefy.com, where contractors basically can go on and by leveraging our database, which essentially mimics all of the different PACE programs in any particular state and all of the different voluntarily participating funders in that particular state, they can go on, write an address into the project field, have that address qualified for one or more programs, and then immediately receive, and I'm talking in less than 1 minute, receive competitive funding proposals for their projects. This is really useful, again, for the type of project that does not involve a lot of capital stacking, such as that Rachel was discussing earlier, but that basically are 2 or 3 scope projects, retrofit projects in, say, the sub $2 million area. And we hope to be able to launch that in Oregon as soon as you get your program started. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Phillipe, thank you so much. Hey, I recognize that church project.
I know you do.
That's a great project. Thank you so very much. Again, no direct questions, but we'll have some in the follow-up after the presentations. I'd like to introduce Rafi Golberstein, President and CEO of Pace Loan Group, giving us a presentation on some their projects. Rafi, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks everyone for spending time with us here this afternoon. Let me share my screen here. Alrighty, so my name is Rafi Golberstein. I'm the President and CEO of Pace Loan Group. We are a direct PACE lender. We're based in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, but we work nationwide. We have loans in 14 states, which is the majority of the PACE active states in the country today. And we are balance sheet lenders. So everything we do sits on our books and sort of lives with Pace Loan Group as the loans mature. We also have the distinction of being the only active PACE lender presently in Oregon. To date, we've written all 3 PACE loans in the state. And I'm going to talk about one of them here. And Robert Countryman, who is going to be following me, will probably mention 1 or 2 of the other ones we worked on together. But I think it's helpful to be able to see real world examples in your market, so you can get a sense of how this is actually deployed. So the first one I want to talk about is a property called Cpace. This is in Portland. This is, for those who are familiar with the area, right at the intersection of MLK and Burnside, just across the bridge from downtown. And this property was a former SRO, single room occupancy, historic building that had been effectively shuttered for many years. As you can see, this is the pre-picture. You can see it was not in great shape. And it was being converted into as only you can have in Portland, a high-end hipster hostel, which typically would be oxymoronic, but actually works in Portland. But it was still a pretty esoteric use, right? Hostels, while they're hospitality, it's not the run-of-the-mill hospitality. It's a little bit out there. And so this was a challenging project for the developers to finance. And so what we had here was about a $12 million project cost. And we identified that there was about $3.5 million of PACE eligibility that we can use to help finance the construction and rehabilitation of this building. And what we ended up doing was, aside from energy efficient improvements, which, as has been discussed earlier here, all states allow for PACE, certain states, specifically along the West Coast, also allow for seismic retrofit properties to be PACE eligible, which is virtually every property that's been built in the last 100 years along the West Coast. So there's a massive market for seismic PACE in Oregon and elsewhere. And so on this particular deal, we took the $3.5 million of eligibility and we spread it across energy efficiency and seismic retrofit. So the way that the sponsor ultimately got this project developed, given its non-traditional use as a hostel, was basically using a PACE loan from us, seller financing. So the seller of the property basically wrote the buyers a loan to help finance themselves. And then they used crowdsourcing. They used CrowdStreet, which is local to Portland, Oregon, as well, to help finish the capital stack. Now, once the project opened successfully, it became much less risky from the traditional banking community's perspective. And so it was subsequently refinanced with First Republic Bank, who wrote the traditional mortgage loan, and the PACE remains in place today. One of the questions we get very often from clients and borrowers is trying to understand what is PACE eligible and what is not PACE eligible. And I think Rachel did a really good job of touching on this. But the way that we kind of looked at this project was we said, look, anything that is electrical, mechanical, plumbing, plus anything that's seismic in Oregon is PACE eligible. Things that are not PACE eligible are FF&E, furniture and fixtures. So the beds, the chairs, the drawers, flooring, painting, carpet, concrete work, parking lot overlays. That's the sort of stuff that's generally not PACE eligible. But everything else on the left-hand side of the screen here is. And in most instances, projects already have PACE eligibility in them. And it's just a matter of educating the clients and the owners of the real estate to realize that it's already there. Another example to go through here is a deal we did in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This was an existing, sorry, my cat likes to make an appearance on this. This is an existing stabilized, effectively showroom in the Twin Cities, a furniture showroom with about 125 tenants. And as you can see from the photo here, a massive atrium that runs right through it. And the building was previously owned by a TIC, which is a type of fractured ownership structure, which is typically very hard to capitalize and make capital calls. And so for many years, the asset was capital starved, meaning that there was no ability to infuse money to make the necessary improvements to the windows and the HVACs and whatnot. And so it was acquired by a new buyer, and they had about a $15 million renovation budget. And we were able to speak with them and help them realize that of the $15 million they already planned to do to retrofit this building, about $4 million of it was PACE eligible as of right. They didn't have to go spend extra money doing anything they weren't already doing. The costs were already there. And so from the developer standpoint, they basically were able to replace about $4 million of their capital stack with equity, which typically costs double digits, with PACE, which typically runs in the 5 to 6% range, somewhere in there. So PACE was massively accretive in their cost of capital and effectively served as an IRR juicer to the developers. So those are two very brief examples of how PACE works. I know that Robert Countryman will give some more examples of some of the deals we've done locally. And so I think, unless there are any questions, without further ado, I will pass it on to Robert.
I'm going to step in right here. Rafi, thank you so very much. I don't think it's actually an official Zoom call until the cat shows up. So that was great. That was great. Thank you. Yes, next up, Robert Countryman, Market President with First Interstate Bank. We're getting some questions, and we'll take those at the end and share those among the group.
Thanks, Mike. Hopefully you can see my screen here. There we go. Yeah, thank you. My name is Robert Countryman, Market President for First Interstate Bank. Those of you who don't know, First Interstate Bank is based out of Billings, Montana. We currently operate in 6 states: Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and South Dakota, and recently announced an acquisition of a bank called Great Western Bank based out of South Dakota. So we'll be operating in about additional 8 Midwest states as well. So I appreciate you guys having me on. I know we're excited to see if we can get help Deschutes County get launched on a Cpace program. So that's part of my interest in attending today. As you know, as Rafi had indicated, we have done 2. Just so it's clear, so you know, when Rachel was talking, she was talking about lender consent. So you know, our role, First Interstate Bank's role in some of these projects is as a senior lender or a conventional lender. So we don't do PACE financing ourselves directly. We do conventional lending. We give consent to groups like you know, Rachel's group and Phillipe's group, as well as Rafi's group, to add PACE financing to the capital stack. I'm going to talk briefly about two projects that we've done here in Portland, and then I'll quickly go through, you know, why would a senior conventional lender want to partner up with Cpace financing. So first of all, I'll highlight a couple projects. I think Rafi had alluded to those, and we worked directly with the PACE loan group on financing for both of these. I was originally introduced to Cpace financing in late 2018. The PACE lending program here in Multnomah County, downtown Portland, is called Property Fit. And we worked with, that's kind of my first intro to Cpace financing was a project called Premier Gear Building. Premier Gear Building, I started talking to PACE lenders. We started talking to PACE lenders in late 18 and got the financing, construction financing in place middle of 2019. And the Premier Gear project is approximately a $28 million project. It's a retrofit adaptive reuse of a building that used to be, the building was built in 1918 and had been used for grinding large industrial gears for many years. And the company decided to move outside of the city. And our sponsors, a group called Sturgeon Development Partners, had purchased the property and had worked, they were working with on the project with a couple LRS architects worked on the project, as well as Lawrence Broom Construction. So that was kind of the project team. We originally went through and talked to 2 PACE lenders, and we had 1 PACE lender that was ready to go, decided not to do the project, primarily because there was some environmental cleanup that needed to be done on the project. And so the story is kind of last minute. We were able to partner up with Rafi and his group, and we're able to kind of get the PACE program, Cpace program, put in place. And it's a great building. Actually, the building was completed in 2000 last year. Actually, it was completed fall last year, and primarily is in lease up now. So we went from an old industrial building to a Class A creative office space. Original building was about 48,000, 50,000 square feet. They added a 17,000 square foot mezzanine on it. Exciting part, there's about $3.5 million of seismic opportunity there, and about little over $1 million in energy efficiency pieces. So we had about $4.5 million of eligible expenses to work with. PACE loan group came in with a $3 million PACE loan. Our construction loan, retrofit loan, was about 19.5. There were some additional pieces on top of equity. There's just additional pieces of some tax credits, local tax credits, and things like that to kind of finish out the equity stack. Beautiful building, great project, great use of PACE lending for that project. Our second project is a property called the PAE living building, and PAE is a consulting engineering company here in Portland, and they decided to partner up with a group called Girding Edlin. I think they're actually Edlin and Company now, but they decided to partner up with ZGF Architects, PAE Engineering, Walsh Construction, and then Girding Edlin. And so it was a great there's a great opportunity to work with that group on developing what's going to be one of the first living buildings. Essentially, a living building is a zero, it's a net neutral neutral carbon building. They're also focused on neutral water. And so I think from a emission standpoint, it's going to be it's a showcase building. And so obviously, and Rafi, you have to remind me, but I think the opportunity, the eligible expenses were $6 or $7 million out of a $40 million project that we could use for PACE. And we're able to kind of bring PACE in for another $3 million on that project as well. And the building, I just toured, we did get temporary C of O here recently, and touring the building, it's an amazing project. So you'll see a lot more information and PR about it, but there's very few true projects, especially a commercial project that has taken on the living building challenge. So it's crazy what happens in the building, because they actually compost all the toilets. It's a bizarre process, but the basement of the building looks like something you'd see in an aircraft carrier or something. So it consolidates everything, separates out the water, uses solar energy, uses rainwater. Phenomenal project. Again, a little bit probably over the top for projects that we're typically looking at, but we're very proud to have partnered up with Edlin and Company to get the project done. And again, kind of back to the senior debt standpoint, I wanted to touch on a couple things. Because one of the big issues or challenges, obviously, is getting senior bank financing or conventional bank financing. Because Cpace here in Oregon, again, was launched really in 2017 in Multnomah County, and so that program was a little slow to get off the ground, and we've been able to kind of partner up. There were some issues with some of the documentation and things like that compared to other states, and kudos really to Rafi and their group. They worked with Multnomah County to kind of develop some of the issues, and correct some of the issues that were a challenge. And so I think we've been able to kind of utilize that. And our hope is to be able to kind of utilize a similar program for Deschutes County when we're ready to kind of get up and down and rolling on the PACE financing program for Deschutes County. On the lender side, part of my focus or interest in working or even being on this panel is to try to help maybe other lenders, in addition just to First Interstate Bank, on accepting or consenting on particular deals. Because I think it's a great program. As Rafi mentioned, there's a lot of retrofit or seismic challenges on the West Coast that need to be addressed. And then certainly I think from a energy efficiency, sustainability standpoint, the PACE financing is a great way to go. On the lender side, I don't know if there's any lenders on the phone, but or on the call. But one of the great parts about the PACE lending is it reduces lenders' loan to value. Technically, we are in a like a tax lien potential. We are in a subordinated position to a certain extent to PACE, although overall the PACE part basically is almost like on a pari passu position with the bank. Cpace financing is long-term and flexible and remains attached to the property, so the property owner could sell the property and wouldn't necessarily have to have the PACE loan itself paid off. And again, on the acceleration standpoint, if there is a default, the loan cannot be accelerated, so it leaves both the senior lender and the PACE lender in the same position. Typically lowers the overall cost of capital on our two projects we were talking about. The options, we're potentially looking at mezzanine financing or even preferred debt or equity. Typically that's going to be double digit 10-12% versus if you look at most Cpace financing, that's more in that 5.5 to 6.5% range. So certainly it reduces the overall cost of capital. Also, a lot of projects, if they're using preferred debt or some kind of mezzanine financing on the construction side, usually there's a bullet, might be a 3-year bullet or something along those lines, which, if the project gets done, maybe doesn't lease up as fast, or we have a change in the capital markets, as we've seen a few times over here over the last couple of years. reduces the potential risk, refinance risk. So again, we've been in projects where there's preferred debt that comes in. Maybe the project slowed down because of COVID or whatever. We've been able to kind of utilize utilize the Cpace financing on putting that long term, because again, the loan itself would go 25, potentially even 30-year AM. So it's a nice additional long-term financing compared to maybe like I said, preferred debt or equity, waterfall that needs to be paid out earlier than that. Usually lowers the overall operating costs. Obviously, we've been talking about energy efficiency savings, so that certainly helps the project owner. And then, a lot of banks actually have kind of a focus on sustainability targets and goals, and certainly the projects that we worked on here allowed us to kind of hit some of those goals that we were looking to hit. So with that, this is my contact information. Again, I'm very interested in trying to support expansion of the Cpace program across the state, especially in Deschutes County. So if you have questions or whatever, feel free to reach out to me. And Mike, I think I will turn it back over to you.
Robert, thank you so much. That was great. And we'll have a couple of questions for you coming back in here. We're going to go to Q&A, but I want to make sure everyone is aware that we're going to have industry breakout groups right after this session, and that'll be at 1:30. So if you haven't already done so, please register for those. You can see what the breakout sessions are right then. They're up on the screen now, and some really, really good ones, and a lot of information is going to be delivered in those. All right, and then in the chat, we'll also have that registration link. So basically that starts at 1:30. So I'm going to go over to this. Got some questions here. I want to address those. First one up, EV charging, has it been included in any of the projects that folks have financed? And do you see this as an opportunity? I'm going to take about 30 seconds on. I've done about 5 of those in projects, and that's ranged from 2 EV chargers to 12 EV chargers. And in the city of Los Angeles, it pretty much is mandatory that as you're doing a project, any type of project on a building at this point in time, that you're needing to add EV chargers. So those have been under a mandate where people have done them. And we've partnered Cpace with local incentives, either from the utility or the state, or from the car company itself, as Tesla and Saturn both had programs. Anybody else want to take on that question? Any of our panelists want to grab it? You'll need to unmute.
Mike, I'm happy to throw in my 30 seconds on that. Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think I can speak for all the panelists to say that EV charging is increasingly an integral part of these upgrades, especially when it comes to energy independence and energy efficiency. In my breakout session, if anybody who's interested in multifamily housing and that kind of stuff, will specifically address that. But it is not just an opportunity to be more competitive as a building if you are doing one of the really high-end types of projects that we just heard some of my colleagues talk about, or more run-of-the-mill mom and pop projects. It's more attractive to have EV chargers these days than not to have them. Obviously, you're bringing in a whole a clientele, so it makes you more competitive as a building. Cpace absolutely recognizes it and not only wants to encourage it, but wants to fund it. And also, it's a potential revenue generator, so it figures in the cash flow configuration.
Thank you. Anybody else want to take that one on? All right, so moving to another one. So in the chat, there was some conversation about the John Oliver show about residential PACE, and we all have our opinions about that. And I had some firsthand experience around those events. But one of the things that was very clear is contractors had not been in the residential program vetted. So for those of our panelists who have programs, especially I guess directed to Rachel also, so does Petros vet contractors in your program? So are they pre-vetted before they join the program, and kind of what's that process for making sure a contractor is an honest individual?
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction between commercial as well as residential PACE. We deal solely in commercial PACE, so can't quite speak to the residential aspect of it, but we do want to make sure that we highlight the differences between resi and commercial, right? That commercial is, has a lot of layers that go into it, whether it's with a senior lender, there are legal teams reviewing all of the documentation all the way across, leading up to final lender consent for the other components of the capital stack and normal commercial mortgage underwriting in terms of how debt service coverage ratios and LTVs stack up. And so that's an important distinction to make. But when it comes to contractors, typically by the time the projects get to us, the contractors are already in place and they have established relationships with our sponsors that we're going to be funding the projects for. And so that kind of gives a little bit of a seal of approval that they've already been chosen independently of PACE. They're in the project. But again, we do due diligence on the sponsors as well as their contractors, just to make sure that they do have experience. If they say they build $80 million mixed use facilities, we want to make sure that they do have a track record of successfully completing those projects so that we can prevent any sort of consumer protection type issues within the project. I hope that answers your question.
I think that answers it really well. Thank you. As Paula has pointed out in the chat, there is no residential PACE in Oregon. It's only commercial PACE. But it's good for people to understand that distinction around the contractors. To have a couple of questions around really kind of the idea of how to involve the local government, and do you kind of start a program first, or do you find a project first and then bring that to the local government? And for those folks on the panelists who have done that kind of outreach, kind of want to open that question up. Myself, I've had counties and cities and states that I've worked on adopting in, and I've always found that local officials work best when there's actually a real project in front of them and they can see the advantage of that project. So to have all the documentation ready for a program, but if you've got a project and somebody who is a local resident, commercial property owner who says, hey, I really want to do this program, it goes a long way with the elected officials compared to a financier or a developer coming in saying, hey, you need to do this, but yet, you can't really point to anything. So we are going to have a breakout session on this, but kind of anybody can chime in on that, and to add on that part, to kind of what's the purpose and the authority and support structure of that Cpace administrator, whether it's the local government or somebody that the government would be working with. I know Phillipe has worked on some of these issues. I'm sure Rachel and Rafi have also. So if anybody wants to chime in on those.
Sure, I can step in for a moment. And I do think that, Mike, as he pointed out, the breakout session that Michael Yaki will be running shortly here is probably the best place for these answers, because Michael is excellent at rolling out PACE programs across the country, and that is nothing but nuanced. And so it's a little bit tricky to answer that question overall, because it really does depend state by state. But what we found is that once a state at least has PACE enabling legislation in place, it is your likelihood of success in growing that program really is with a developer that has a live project, to have them be one of the primary stakeholders to bring into the various officials and say, hey, X state is live, we have this program, we have this project, we want PACE to be active in our city or county, or whatever it may be. That's been our experience, but truly Michael Yaki is the best source for this.
Yeah, I agree completely with you, Rafi. We've had the same experience at Petros in terms of new program implementation. And so, having a sponsor with that project, getting the city council to dedicate the time to go through and review all the documentation and whatever readings that they need to go through. It's not time intensive by any stretch, but they certainly have competing priorities. So to the extent that we can bring them a tangible project that they can kind of push forward, that really helps, because the last thing that most folks want to do is implement a program and then it sit there for, a period of time before they actually have anything that they can point to. So I encourage anyone, if you have a project that you're interested in utilizing, I know it seems a little bit of putting the cart before the horse, but it really is the most effective way to help with program implementation, and just to show that they're helping to support local constituencies, getting their projects completed and funded, and revitalizing whatever areas and increasing efficiency for the county or the city, whatever it might be.
Anybody else want to jump in on that one? Not addressing that in that second half was the purpose, authority, and support structure of the PACE administrator. I've worked for a couple of PACE administrators, and I'll take a short stab at that one, but I think also Michael will be addressing that one in his breakout. And typically, again, what we've seen is that in the early days of PACE, the local government was the local administrator, and that just ran into, just really all kinds of issues, basically being that this was a function outside of local government's wheelhouse, right? Outside the specialty, and it was just extra added burden. So the financiers started to take on that administrative role, which is paid for within the financing of the project, right? And so their purpose became to ensure that all of the legal Cpace rules put down by the state or by the individual district were followed. That authority of the administrator was in either the state statute or the local statute, right? And that authority is also in the contract that is signed with the property owner, where it says that this administrator is working on behalf of the tax district authority, the local county, or the local city, and has the right to record the tax assessment and to place the collection onto the property tax bill and collect the dollars to pay back the financing. And typically, the support structure has become that Cpace administrator is hiring their own staff, and that staff does not need to reside over at the county, and that staff is paid for by the fees that the property owner pays as part of the financing. So that's the kind of the high level, very quick kind of a view. We have about 3 more minutes for questions or kind of final wrap-ups. I'm not sure if any of our panelists within the conversation wanted to add anything. I want to give a minute for them to be able to do that. Anybody want to pop on? Want to remind folks, breakout session link is in the chat. At this point, I want to thank our presenters. I want to thank Rachel Davis with Petros. I want to thank Phillipe Hartley with Clean Financing LLC, Rafi with Pace Loan Group, Robert Countryman with First Interstate Bank. I think it's great what First Interstate is doing, and I always just want to commend all the financial institutions that support the program. I want to flip this back over to Diane for some wrap-up items. And again, a reminder that the breakout sessions come up at 1:30 in about 20 minutes, and the link is in the chat.
Thank you, Michael. really lots of information in that session. And I'm encouraging everyone to make sure to go to that link that has appeared in the chat a couple of times to make sure that you can attend those breakout sessions. And I guess we do have a question. Can you move from one breakout session to another? We are allowing 15 minutes for breakout sessions, so I think that that's going to be difficult to do. So I think that, and Carly, I'm inviting you to put that change into that, or to change that narrative I just spoke about, if what I'm saying is true. But if we're looking at a 15-minute allowance, that would be 7 minutes. That's not very much. So someone you're saying, so Carly's saying that yes, you can switch from one breakout to another. So I guess she will have instructions for you on that once you sign in for those breakout sessions. We'll have more for you on that shortly. So we will be breaking now, and we will be starting up again at 1:30. So in about 17 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, my name is Jeff Rollet. I'm a board member with 350 Deschutes. Every year, we offer the Go Clean Energy Conference, bringing our guests valuable content to help save this fragile planet and improve our quality of life. We'd like to continue to offer this conference for free, but we need your help. You can help by donating $10, $20, $50 or more. Just go online to 350deschutes.org/donate. Again, that's 350deschutes.org/donate. And go clean energy. Thank you so much.